Today, we're going to be tackling something that you might not realize you encounter every day.
Yeah.
Clinical studies.
Oh.
You know, those research articles that tell us whether that new diet is worth trying or if that latest health scare is really something to worry about.
Right.
So we're diving into a research article from the Clinical and Experimental Emergency Medicine Journal to kind of give you the tools to decode those studies
Yeah.
and figure out what they really mean for you.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for the world of medical research.
I love that analogy. And speaking of decoding, we've got to start with the basics.
Okay.
Observational studies versus clinical trials.
Right.
You've probably heard these terms before, but what's the actual difference?
Oh.
And why should you care?
Imagine you're trying to figure out if coffee causes insomnia.
Okay.
An observational study might look at a group of coffee drinkers and a group of non-coffee drinkers and see who sleeps better.
Got it.
But a clinical trial would randomly assign people to either drink coffee or a placebo and then track their sleep patterns.
Oh.
You see the difference?
Okay, yeah, that makes it crystal clear. So in the observational study, you're just watching what happens naturally.
Exactly.
But in a clinical trial, you're actively manipulating something,
Right.
the coffee intake, to see how it affects the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So which one gives you more reliable answers?
Good question. Clinical trials are generally considered the gold standard because they're designed to minimize bias.
Okay,
That random assignment helps make sure the groups are comparable.
right.
So you can be more confident that any differences in sleep are actually due to the coffee and not some other hidden factor.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this matters. But let's unpack those observational studies a bit more.
Okay.
The article mentions three main types: case control, cohort, and cross-sectional.
Right.
Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with a cautionary tale about case control studies.
Oh.
There was a time when doctors recommended hormone replacement therapy to prevent heart disease in women based on observational data.
Oh, wow.
Later, a large clinical trial showed that HRT actually increased the risk of heart problems.
Oh, no.
It turned out that the initial observational studies were flawed because women taking HRT were already healthier to begin with.
Wow. That's a perfect example of why we can't just take observational studies at face value.
Right.
So case control studies compare people who already have a condition,
Yes.
the cases, to those who don't, the controls,
Mm-hmm.
to try to find differences that might explain the condition.
Exactly.
Right.
But the example of HRT highlights their biggest limitation.
Okay.
You can't be sure if those differences caused the condition or were just a coincidence.
Right.
It's like trying to figure out if carrying an umbrella causes rain.
Makes sense. So if case control studies are the tricksters of the research world,
Yeah.
what about cohort studies?
Cohort studies are like following a group of friends through life, except these friends are united by a shared characteristic,
Okay.
like smoking habits or exposure to a certain environmental factor.
Got it.
The researchers track them over time to see who develops the outcome of interest, like lung cancer or heart disease.
Okay, so it's all about observing how things unfold over time.
Yeah.
The article mentions a study looking at the prognosis of syncope.
Right.
That's fainting, right?
Yes.
In people who went to the emergency room.
Yes.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. And it's a perfect example of a prospective cohort study.
Okay.
They followed these patients for 30 days to see what happened.
Right.
This type of study gives you a better sense of cause and effect than a case control study.
Right.
But it can still be influenced by confounding factors.
Confounding factors, those are like the party crashers of research, right?
Exactly.
The unexpected variables that can mess up your results. Like, for example, imagine a cohort study finds that people who eat lots of vegetables have lower rates of heart disease.
Yeah.
Great news, right?
Yeah.
But what if those veggie lovers also tend to exercise more and smoke less?
Exactly.
It's hard to know if it's the vegetables or those other healthy habits driving the results.
Right. It's hard to tease those things apart.
So even with cohort studies, we need to be cautious about jumping to conclusions.
Yes.
What about cross-sectional studies?
Yes.
Those sound less time-consuming.
They are. Cross-sectional studies are like taking a snapshot of a population at a single point in time.
Okay.
The article mentions one using routine data to investigate the link between lifestyle and cognitive health,
Oh,
which I'm sure many of our listeners are interested in.
absolutely. We all want to know how to keep our brains sharp as a tack.
Right. But while cross-sectional studies can tell us how common something is,
Yeah.
they can't tell us what causes what.
Right.
It's like observing a group of people on a roller coaster.
Okay.
Some are screaming, some are laughing. But you can't tell if the roller coaster made them that way or if they came in with those emotions.
So it's great for getting a sense of prevalence,
Yes.
but not so great for understanding cause and effect.
Exactly.
Got it.
It's all about knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each design.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork with observational studies.
Good.
Now let's move on to the heavy hitters.
Okay.
Clinical trials.
All right.
I'm ready to dive into the exciting world of interventions, placebos, and double-blind studies.
Let's do it. This is where we really see science in action. Clinical trials, yeah, they really are the cornerstone of medical progress. They help us separate hope from hype and figure out what truly works.
Absolutely. It's like separating the wheat from the chaff in a world of health claims.
Right.
But with so many different types of clinical trials,
Yeah.
how can we tell which ones are the most reliable?
That's where understanding trial design comes in.
Okay.
One key factor is the control group,
Right.
the group that doesn't receive the new treatment.
Right, the comparison group.
Yeah.
I remember the article mentioned placebo controls,
Mm.
active treatment controls,
Uh-huh.
even historical controls.
Yes,
It's like a whole buffet of control groups.
it is. And each one has its pros and cons.
Okay.
The placebo control's classic.
Yeah.
It helps you see if the new treatment is doing more than just creating a feel-good effect.
The placebo effect is so fascinating. I remember reading about a study where people with knee pain got better, even though they were just getting a sham surgery.
Oh, wow.
No actual repairs were done.
Exactly. The mind is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that's why placebo controls are so important.
Right.
They help us disentangle the real effects of a treatment from the power of suggestion.
But sometimes you can't ethically use a placebo,
Yeah.
right? Like if there's already a proven treatment for a serious condition,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to withhold that from the control group.
Absolutely. Ethics
right.
are always paramount in research.
Right.
In those cases, you might use an active treatment control, where the control group gets the current standard of care.
Got it.
It's all about comparing the new treatment to the best existing option.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about historical controls? Aren't those a bit tricky?
They can be.
Yeah.
Historical controls use data from past studies as the comparison group.
Okay.
It can be convenient, but you have to be careful about apples to oranges comparisons.
Right.
The patients in the past might have been different in ways that could skew the results.
Right, like they might have received different medical care or had different lifestyles.
Exactly.
It's like comparing your grandma's baking to a modern-day bakery.
Uh-huh.
The ingredients and techniques have probably changed.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So, while historical controls can be useful in certain situations,
Right.
they require a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay, we've covered control groups.
Yes.
Check. What else makes a clinical trial robust?
Randomization is key.
Okay.
Remember we talked about that coffee and insomnia example?
Yeah.
Assigning people to the coffee or placebo group by chance helps ensure that the groups are similar to begin with, minimizing bias.
It's like shuffling a deck of cards to make sure everyone gets a fair hand.
Exactly.
And that brings us to blinding.
Yes.
Keeping everyone in the dark about who's getting what.
Right.
It sounds a bit sneaky.
It might sound that way, but it's crucial for minimizing bias.
Okay.
In a single-blind study, the participants don't know which treatment they're getting.
Right.
In a double-blind study, both the participants and the researchers are blinded.
So even the people administering the treatment don't know who's getting the real deal.
Exactly. This prevents them from subconsciously treating the groups differently
Wow.
or interpreting the results in a biased way.
Okay.
It's all about letting the data speak for itself.
Randomization and blinding. Got it. But even with those safeguards in place,
Yeah.
there are still different ways to structure a clinical trial, right?
Right.
The article mentioned parallel, crossover, and factorial designs. What's the deal with those?
Those are the different blueprints for how a trial unfolds over time.
Okay.
In a parallel design, each group sticks to their assigned treatment throughout the study.
Right.
Nice and straightforward.
Simple and clean. But don't they usually require a larger number of participants?
They do, because you need enough people in each group to have statistical power.
Right.
The ability to detect a real difference between the treatments if one exists.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about crossover designs?
Well,
Those sound a bit more complicated.
they are.
Yeah.
In a crossover design, participants actually switch treatments partway through the study.
Oh, okay.
Everyone gets to try both treatments,
Uh-huh.
which can be more efficient,
Yeah.
but you have to watch out for carryover effects.
Carryover effects, like if the first treatment lingers in the body and influences how people respond to the second treatment.
Exactly. Imagine you're testing two different types of pain relievers.
Okay.
If the first one is a slow-release formula, it might still be working when people start taking the second one, making it hard to tell which one is truly more effective.
So crossover designs can be clever,
Right.
but require careful planning to avoid those pesky carryover effects.
Exactly.
Now, for the grand finale,
Okay.
factorial designs,
Yes.
those sound like they could get messy.
They can be ambitious, but also incredibly powerful.
Okay.
Factorial designs allow you to test multiple interventions at the same time.
So instead of just comparing a new drug to a placebo, you might also look at different doses or combinations of treatments.
Exactly. It's like multitasking for research.
Right.
You can get answers to multiple questions in a single study,
Yeah.
which can be super efficient,
Right.
but it requires a lot of careful planning and statistical analysis to make sure you're interpreting the results correctly.
Okay. Factorial designs the multitaskers of the clinical trial world.
Yes.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From control groups to randomization, blinding,
Right.
and those different trial designs.
Yeah.
It's like we've unlocked the secrets of clinical trials.
We've definitely equipped ourselves to be more savvy consumers of medical research.
Absolutely. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss.
Okay.
Pragmatic clinical trials.
Right.
They seem to be gaining popularity these days.
They are, yeah.
What makes them so special?
Pragmatic trials are all about bridging the gap between the perfect world of research and the messy reality of everyday healthcare.
Okay.
They're designed to reflect real-world conditions.
So instead of testing a new drug in a highly controlled lab setting,
Yeah,
you might study it in a typical doctor's office or hospital.
exactly. Pragmatic trials often have broader eligibility criteria,
Okay.
meaning they can include a wider range of patients,
Uh-huh.
making the results more generalizable to the real world.
It's like the difference between testing a new car in a wind tunnel versus driving it on actual roads.
Yes.
You get a much better sense of how it performs in real-life conditions.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And because pragmatic trials use routine care procedures,
Right.
the results are more likely to be relevant to everyday clinical practice.
So they're all about practicality and applicability.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm curious,
Yeah.
with all these different types of studies out there,
Uh-huh.
how do we actually use this knowledge to make better decisions about our own health?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Understanding study design empowers you to be a more critical consumer of health information.
Okay, spill the beans. How can we avoid falling prey to those sensational headlines
Right.
and make smarter choices based on evidence?
It all starts with that critical eye we talked about.
Okay.
When you see a headline about a new health breakthrough,
Yeah.
don't just take it at face value.
Right.
Ask yourself, what kind of study was this based on?
Okay.
Was it a small observational study with lots of potential for bias?
Yeah.
Or was it a large, well-designed clinical trial with strong controls?
So it's like having a mental checklist.
Check the study design, check the sample size, check for potential biases.
Exactly. This knowledge gives you a framework for evaluating the strength of the evidence
Right.
and making more informed decisions about your health.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like a research detective.
Good.
But there's one more thing I'm curious about.
Yeah.
The article touched on the growing role of big data in medical research.
Right.
What's the big deal with big data?
Well,
And how does it fit into all of this?
big data is like a treasure trove of information waiting to be unearthed.
Okay.
It's all those electronic health records, insurance claims, and even data from wearable devices.
It's like a digital fingerprint of our health habits.
Exactly. And by analyzing these massive data sets,
Yeah.
researchers can uncover patterns and trends that would be impossible to see with smaller studies.
Wow.
It's opening up new frontiers in disease prevention, diagnosis, and treatment.
I could see how that could be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk of getting lost in all that data?
Right.
How do researchers make sense of it all?
That's where advanced statistical techniques and machine learning come in.
Okay.
These tools help us sift through the mountains of data and identify meaningful insights.
So it's a combination of human ingenuity and computational power.
Precisely. And while big data holds immense promise,
Yeah.
it also comes with ethical considerations.
Right.
We need to ensure that patient privacy is protected and that data is being used responsibly.
Right. We don't want to end up in a sci-fi movie where our health data is being used against us.
Right,
It's
exactly.
like a double-edged sword, powerful, but potentially risky.
Exactly. We need to tread carefully and make sure we're using big data for good.
Okay, I'm starting to see how big data is transforming the landscape of medical research.
Yeah.
It's both exciting and a little bit daunting.
It is.
But before we spiral into a data vortex,
Right.
let's bring this deep dive back to Earth and focus on the human element.
Okay.
Behind all those data sets and study designs are real people.
Yes.
The researchers who dedicate their lives to advancing knowledge, and the participants who generously volunteer their time and information.
Absolutely. We can't forget the human side of research.
Right.
Those participants are the unsung heroes.
Yes.
Without them, none of this progress would be possible.
So a huge thank you to all the research participants out there.
Yes, thank you.
You're the heart and soul of this endeavor.
Absolutely.
And speaking of hearts and souls, we can't overlook the emotional impact of health information.
Right?
It's one thing to understand the science, but it's another thing entirely to grapple with the implications for our own lives and the lives of those we love.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Health information can be empowering, but it can also be overwhelming and anxiety-provoking.
Right.
It's important to remember that knowledge is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's not meant to scare us, but to help us make informed choices.
And sometimes the most informed choice is to simply say, I need a break from all this information.
Absolutely.
It's okay to step away from the news cycle,
Right.
to prioritize self-care and mental well-being.
Absolutely. Information overload is a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to listen to our own needs and limits.
And that's where trusted healthcare providers come in.
Yes.
They can help us navigate the complex world of medical information and make decisions that are right for us.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out to your doctor or other healthcare providers with your questions and concerns.
Right.
They're there to support you and help you make sense of it all.
Okay, I'm feeling much more grounded now. We've covered so much in this deep dive,
We have.
from the nitty-gritty of study designs to the broader implications for our lives and well-being.
Right.
It's been an incredible journey. But before we say goodbye,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listener with one final thought,
Okay.
a parting piece of wisdom to carry with them.
Right.
What's the most important thing you've learned from your years of experience in medical research?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think the most important lesson is that science is a process, not an endpoint. It's constantly evolving, and new discoveries are always challenging old assumptions.
So even the most well-established facts could be overturned by new research.
Exactly. That's what makes science so exciting.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending quest for knowledge.
And that means we, as consumers of that knowledge,
Right.
need to stay flexible, adaptable, and open to new information.
Absolutely. Dogma has no place in science.
I love that.
Right?
So our final takeaway for the listener is this.
Okay.
Embrace the ever-changing nature of scientific knowledge.
Yes.
Stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to question the status quo.
That's the perfect way to sum it up.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know, we've been exploring the fascinating world of clinical studies, and I'm really struck by how much this knowledge can empower us.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like we've been given a backstage pass to the world of medical research.
It really does change how you view those health headlines, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're not just reading the conclusions, you're thinking about the study design.
Yeah.
The potential biases. It's like a whole new level of understanding.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives. They give us the tools to think critically and make informed decisions about our health.
Right.
But it's not just about being a savvy consumer of information, is it?
No.
It's also about recognizing the human element behind all those statistics and findings.
You hit the nail on the head. We can't forget that research is ultimately about people.
Yeah.
It's about the researchers who dedicate their lives to unraveling the mysteries of health and disease.
Right.
And it's about the participants who generously volunteer their time, their information, sometimes even their bodies, to advance medical knowledge.
Thinking about those participants always fills me with a sense of awe and gratitude.
Yeah.
They're the unsung heroes of medical progress.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Their contributions are invaluable.
Yeah.
Every time we benefit from a new treatment
Right.
or a better understanding of a disease, it's because of the countless individuals who participated in research studies.
It's humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And it reminds us that research isn't just an intellectual pursuit.
Right.
It's deeply intertwined with human experience.
Absolutely. And speaking of human experience, we can't overlook the emotional impact of health information.
Right.
It's one thing to understand the science, but it's another thing entirely to process the implications for our own lives and the lives of those we care about.
So true. Yeah. Sometimes that knowledge can be a source of hope and empowerment, but sometimes it can also trigger fear and anxiety.
Right.
I know I've definitely fallen into the trap of medical Google-itis, where I end up down a rabbit hole of worst-case scenarios.
Oh, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
It's a natural human response to want to understand what might be happening in our bodies.
Right.
But it's important to remember that information is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used wisely or unwisely.
So how do we strike that balance between staying informed and protecting our mental well-being? It's like a tightrope walk.
It's a good question. I think it starts with being mindful of our own limits.
Okay.
It's okay to step away from the news cycle, to take a break from Dr. Google,
Right.
to prioritize self-care and emotional well-being.
That's such an important reminder. Sometimes the most informed choice is to simply say, I need a break from all this information.
Exactly. We need to listen to our bodies and our minds.
Yeah.
If we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious,
Right.
it's okay to disconnect for a while.
And that's where trusted healthcare providers come in.
Absolutely.
They can help us navigate the complex world of medical information and make decisions that are right for us.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out to your doctor or other healthcare providers with your questions and concerns.
Yeah.
They're there to support you and help you make sense of it all.
Okay, I'm feeling much more grounded now.
Good.
We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From the nitty-gritty of study designs to the broader implications for our lives and well-being.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
But before we say goodbye, I want to leave our listener with one final thought, a parting piece of wisdom to carry with them.
Okay.
What would you say is the most important thing that you've learned from your years of experience in medical research?
That's a tough one. I think the most important lesson is that science is a process, not an end point.
Okay.
It's constantly evolving, and new discoveries are always challenging old assumptions.
So even the most well-established facts could be overturned by new research.
Exactly. That's the beauty and the challenge of science.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending quest for knowledge, and as consumers of that knowledge, we need to stay curious, flexible, and open to new information.
I love that. It's a reminder that learning is a lifelong process.
Yes.
And there's always more to discover.
Absolutely.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of clinical studies and feel empowered to navigate the world of health information with a more critical and discerning eye.
Yes.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and be an active participant in your own health journey.